It's Doodly Squatch here. How's it going? Time for a new episode. This one was dictated by my youngest. He's 5 years old, and he loves for me to draw him monsters. So often enough, he'll stop by in my office and bully me into drawing a monster for him. So here is an example of that. All right, here we go. So usually how these start is it's usually dictated by the number of eyes. My son, his name's Ivan, and it'll usually be, I want a monster. Okay, what's he look like? He has lots of eyes. So lots usually means definitely more than three. And then, usually sharp teeth, big tongue. And it's funny because he said this time he wanted a spiky tongue. But, not a lot of direction when it comes to like shape, unless it's, shapes of the eyes. But as far as the body goes, I can usually fiddle around. Said big claws, and I think he said tentacles and horns on this one. But it's a lot of fun. I love the ideas that come from small children, especially early on when it's just mostly they're working off their own imagination. They haven't been exposed to too much or locked in, as I would put it. Often enough kids, they'll have creative ideas, but then it almost gets tainted by they'll watch a bunch of YouTube stuff, and then it's all Freddy Fazbear, or I'll have a kid describing a monster to me, and I can tell I'm like, this is from Backrooms or SCP or Poppy Playtime, that sort of stuff. And that's okay. It's a good springboard. But often, I don't know, I prefer before that moment happens. Seeing what they're able to come up with. What's amusing about when my son wants me to draw a monster, he's seen some of these videos and he assumes I draw that fast. So he's like, Dad, you're taking a long time. he doesn't know that these are, I've sped up the footage on these, and that I don't know if anyone draws that fast. Maybe, but certainly not me. But also, he'll finish describing it to me and then immediately launch into the colors, and then it's like, whoa. hold on. Let me ink it. I'm creating here. I gotta at least get to, step one done before we hop into step two. Let's see. Yeah, but most of, there is a running theme, I would say, with his monsters. And he knows I like drawing monsters, but I would say the origin of that is when I was 3 years old, my parents got me a My Pet Monster. It's a big plush thing. I don't know if I'm pretty sure that the toy preceded the show. There was a cartoon, and then there was a really bad movie. But it would have been early 80s or mid to late 80s when this came out. And little 3-year-old me couldn't say monster right, so I called it my monker. I'm like, my monker, big monker. And that he's been with me forever. I still have him. Right now he adorns the bookshelf in my office. I've got my collection of a whole lot of things. I got one of these days I'll make an office tour video, if that's at all something somebody's interested in. I don't know. What do you guys think? A lot of people tend to like my office. It's a bit of a mess, but what artist doesn't have a messy office? Anywho, back to the monster. He was just cool. Big blue furry body, big bulbous green nose. It looks like a pickle, and then just big yellow eyes and big cranky old teeth and all that. And yeah, that kind of set me on fire for like monsters. I loved, not exactly scary monsters, but cute monsters too. But I think later on, the Howie Mandel movie Little Monsters had come out, and I saw that, and that gave me a different direction to go in. Just as far as they can be scary, but they can also look cool. My childhood favorite movie for a long time was Beetlejuice, and I would have people over to watch that with me, and my mom got a few concerned phone calls from parents of kids my age that aren't watching Beetlejuice, being exposed to Beetlejuice. So that was always interesting. I don't even know what got me turned on to that. If I accidentally saw it when my folks were watching it, or I was the oldest child, so that sort of stuff. You forget what you're watching around your kids. When it's your first kid. But I'd say that it's fairly tame compared to what goes on TV now. But Beetlejuice was a big influence for sure when it came to my humor. Some of the ways I would talk. I remember getting in trouble for repeating a line from the movie that dropped the F-bomb. I didn't know what the F-bomb was until then. Whoops, Windows button. Yeah, this guy's a rainbow, isn't he? I'm just going off the kids' descriptions, and he likes color. He likes a lot of color. Well, yeah, Beetlejuice always did it for me. I love dark stuff. I love spooky, scary things and all that. But it's, I guess my focus today is finding things you like when you're young and seeing what sticks. What follows you. Does every horse girl remain a horse girl? Do they grow up to be a farrier or something like that, and take care of horses, or are there things that we get into in childhood that don't follow us into adulthood? It's an interesting question, because I think if you asked my folks and people from their generation, they'd say no, childish things remain in your childhood and not much follows you, and I'd say that's pretty darn true with some folks. I'm always impressed with how over it people can be with like cartoons or just kiddie stuff, and they'll look at adults weird if they're still into cartoons or fantasy books or that sort of stuff. Superhero movies, comic books, things that were considered childish are now mainstream because those children grew up, and we're the consumers, so it's interesting to I keep using that word. At least I find it of interest that's kind of how things go, and I don't think it's going away, because now kids are growing up kind of surrounded by that kind of media. So these kids have never known a time where there was not another superhero movie in the can waiting to come out, and whereas for me it was a real shock and surprise when like Batman came out, or the live action Mario Brothers. I was I think in 4th or 5th grade when that came out, and I loved it. It was amazing. And then the first Mortal Kombat movie. All these movies that are kind of well known for being a guilty pleasure or not so well respected, but at least nostalgic, that kind of thing. Most of the movies based on comics were kind of stinkers when I was a kid, but I didn't know any better. I still loved them. I was excited. Spawn, freaking Spawn. John Leguizamo as Clown, all that. And I'm happy to see that they're starting to bring those back. They're talking about doing another Spawn, or doing like Constantine 2 or things like that. But I don't know, just kind of a rambly day today, but enjoying this monster. I feel like I made it a little too shiny. I'm hoping I hope past me remembers to blend those edges a little bit. It looks a little plastic. Unless that was my intention at the time, shoot. That's always, for me, a difficult line to draw, pun intended, when I'm coloring things, if I want to keep those edges sharp or if I want to soften them. And I think I've found kind of a marriage between the two, depending on the lighting. And, the more you learn and the more you do things, you kind of find your preference and find your way around it. If you ever have any art-related questions, I'm no teacher, but I'd be happy to help, lend my bit of advice. If anybody's even looking for that, I don't know. I'm just some old dude on the internet. So, anywho, here we go. Victory lap, putting that white around it, sealing it in. This is the end, and there she be. But you'll probably see a couple more of these. These pop up pretty frequently, and it's usually when I'm attempting to record, when I'm recording my drawings, and Ivan will come in and and he will want a monster, and so I'll have to do that. But I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something new, or at least had a giggle. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Share it. If you have any questions or requests or ideas, what I could draw, what I could talk about, let me know in the comments below. I'll check them out, and we'll keep on going. Thanks, folks. See ya.